Hello, everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and it's time for Jabroni's Guide to Metaphor Refantazio. I have been absolutely obsessed with this game, and one of the big reasons for that, well, besides everything about it, is how fun the combat is. And I've stumbled upon a build that is seemingly really dang powerful, and I just got to Brylehaven, so this is gonna mostly be for that early to mid-game for Metaphor Refantazio, but if you find yourself struggling, or you just don't know what to pick, there's some mechanics that I found people just to be unaware of that are particularly powerful, and I want to go over them in this video. One, get Maria as a follower to rank 4, because you unlock two things. Speed cooking, which allows you to cook on the gauntlet runner without expending time, and some of the food you can cook there is quite nice, like being able to generate MP while running in a dungeon, or just food in general can be quite nice, and some side quests require certain food to be made, so instead of wasting a time slot, you can just cook all the time and not have to worry about that inefficiency. But also it just generates more XP in post-battle, so that's a particularly powerful follower to try and get to rank 4 as early as you can, in my opinion. Now, the build. There's a few archetypes that are particularly powerful. Merchant and Faker. They come from side characters, and they're not main story, but they are particularly powerful. Merchant comes from Vegeta, who's available very early on, and Faker comes from Cuculus, who I call Cucumber, who you can meet up with in Martira. You have to unlock their followers, and you'll then unlock Faker and Merchant. The reason these two archetypes are so powerful is a couple of reasons. Merchant uses the weapon type Abacus, and in one of the dungeons, it's been a bit so I forget, you can purify it at the church to get one of two different effects. The effect I went for, and the one that I would recommend, is the one that doubles the cost of gold spending abilities, because the way Merchant works is it has an almighty damage attack that costs gold, your currency in the game. It doesn't use SP, doesn't use HP, it uses your money. This Abacus doubles the cost of the gold you expend, but it also doubles the damage. But Merchant, when you defeat an enemy, generates additional gold. I tend to find that I get about 450 gold per kill, and the spell, while being double cost, only costs 1,000. That is really efficient, and that's not a big downside at all. For every spell cast, you only need to kill like 3 mobs to recoup your money and more. And the thing like trucks damage out like it's no tomorrow, like 500 to 600, and again, I only just started Brylehaven. That is a lot of damage for a spell cast that early on. Granted, I had a couple of attack buffs, but still, the other part of this build will get you a lot of buffs and apply a lot of debuffs because Faker is so dang good. What Faker does, it's the archetype that applies debuffs to enemies. Attack, defense, and agility. And if you haven't invested in debuffs yet, I would recommend doing so because it's a complete game changer. Bosses, especially, will do a lot less damage, especially when you stack these debuffs up to 3 times. They can also take a lot more damage with defense downs, and they can miss. And in Metaphor Refantazio, when the enemy misses because you apply enough agility debuffs, it's like a blessing from God, because they lose additional turns. It can completely change the dynamic of the fight. And you combine that with the spell Formation of Vega. This comes from Commander, but what it does is it puts all of your characters in the front row, and it gives everyone on your team 2 attack buffs. That is really powerful, especially when you're applying debuffs to the enemy. But you may be going, Jmulls, this sounds really inefficient turn-wise. Good news, Faker does more. Besides just applying debuffs, which would be good by itself, it also has an ability called Faker's Roguery. Now, it has the chance to inflict Forget on one enemy, but no one cares about that. What it really does is it adds turn icons, or it can be removed. It's random. But in my experience, I tend to find that it adds turns more often than it does remove turns or gives you any negative effect. And it's not just like, oh, it adds an additional turn or 2. No, this can go up to like 4. And while it has a chunky MP cost being 48, if you're only really utilizing this on elite enemies or bosses, in my opinion, this is extremely powerful because it gives you plenty of extra turns to apply a lot of debuffs or buffs to your party, and then really churn out damage. On the second fight that I had with Katharina, I got an unscathed triumph because I just managed to unload ungodly amounts of damage into her. I put Faker on Heisme, and he generally goes first for me. So I can use Faker's roguery, so if it doesn't apply 3 or 4 turn icons, I can just turn back the clock and try again until I get the right RNG. That gives me plenty of turns to apply agility debuffs with Hulkenberg, or I can use a synthesis skill she packs to lower the defense of the enemy. I can apply other debuffs when the turn goes back to Heisme, who's my Faker. I can give my entire party +2 attack with Formation of Vigor on Merchant, with the inherited skill from Commander. That comes from Broden, by the way. So you end up in this situation where you get a lot of turns, but also you apply a lot of buffs and debuffs, so when you do your attacks, they do a lot of damage. I can use gold attack on Merchant, which costs only like 1,000 gold, which is like nothing. This thing can crit, by the way, and it deals almighty damage. So I don't have to worry about the resistances of the enemy. It's almighty. It's going to hit anyways. And if the target doesn't repel physical, like slashing specifically, I can have Stroll on Swordmaster because he has a synthesis skill with Merchant called Phantom Sword Swarm. It's only 16 MP, but it deals medium physical slash damage 4 to 6 times to one enemy. This thing annihilates bosses, because you pair that with the ×2 attack buff you got from the Commander inherited skill, on top of the debuffs you can apply with Faker, on top of the additional turns you get from Faker, on top of being able to put out like 500 to 600 points of damage with the Merchant gold attack, and you're just pumping damage quickly. You gain plenty of turns to be able to do all of this, and you can make it so the boss may miss more often if you elect to apply agility debuffs. All the while, you're pumping out damage, and while this may be MP inefficient for certain characters, if you're saving this strategy for when you really need it against certain bosses, then you're golden, and you can completely change the dynamic of some of these fights. You don't even need the full build. Like, Faker by itself is just that guy. It is that good, because it applies so many debuffs, and while it does cost a lot of MP, it can give you a lot of extra turns to capitalize on those debuffs you apply. So my recommendation would be, if you are struggling in Metaphor Refantazio in this early to mid game, check out Faker, check out Merchant, pick up Commander, and like inherit certain skills from it, and just mess around, because I guarantee you there's going to be more busted builds later in this game. There's so many cool synergies and stuff you can do in this game with pairing various archetypes together, and it's been fun just to experiment. So in the comments down below, let me know what you have cooking. What's been your favorite archetype to use? What's been a cool trick you've picked up? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your stories. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.